Efficiency is key, she said, not bothering to look up from her computer screen. My name is Harold McMillan. I'm 63 years old, and I'd been working at Delton Manufacturing in Detroit for 31 years. 3 days. That's all I had left before my retirement ceremony. 3 days before I could walk away from the noise of the factory floor, the smell of metal shavings, and the weight of responsibility I'd carried as shift lead for the past 8 years. But sitting in Vanessa Cole's sterile office that Monday morning, something felt wrong. Real wrong. She'd called me in at 7 a.m. sharp, before my shift even started. The woman had been our operations director for 6 months now, brought in from some consulting firm to streamline productivity and implement cost reduction measures. Those were her words, not mine. Half the floor crew couldn't even pronounce the buzzwords she threw around in meetings. "We've reviewed your personnel file," she continued, fingers clicking across her keyboard like she was typing my obituary. "Due to operational efficiency requirements, we're terminating your employment effective immediately." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. 3 days before my retirement ceremony? Now she looked up. Had this little smirk on her face like she was enjoying herself. "You'll still get your pension, Mr. McMillan. But the ceremony? That was a company courtesy. 31 years. 0 safety violations. I'd trained half the apprentices currently working the floor. My picture was already in the company newsletter with the headline, 'End of an Era.' My wife Helen had bought a new dress for the ceremony. My daughter Claire had requested time off work to attend. I'd already turned in my ID badge Friday afternoon, finished my final safety report, cleaned out my locker. The only thing left was shaking hands with the CEO and accepting some engraved plaque that would sit on my mantelpiece until I died. "HR will walk you out," Vanessa added, already looking back at her screen. I stood up slowly. My knees creaked the way they always did after sitting too long. "Efficiency is key," I said, and walked out. Security was waiting in the hallway. 2 young guys I'd never seen before, probably contractors. They flanked me like I was some kind of criminal as we walked through the plant. Workers stopped what they were doing to stare. Jimmy Torres, who I'd been mentoring for 2 years, looked confused as hell. I just nodded at him and kept walking. Outside, they handed me a cardboard box with my personal items. Coffee mug Helen had given me for Christmas. Photo of my granddaughter. Reading glasses I kept in my desk drawer. That's when I knew things were about to get interesting. I'd started at Delton right out of high school in 1994. 18 years old, didn't know a damn thing about manufacturing. My dad had worked the line at Ford for 30 years before the plant closed, and he told me to find something stable. "Get in with a good company," he said. "Keep your head down, do the work, and they'll take care of you." Delton took care of me all right. Promoted me to line supervisor after 5 years. Made me shift lead 8 years ago when old Mickey Brennan had his heart attack. I'd been running the night crew ever since, making sure quotas got met and nobody got hurt. In 31 years, I'd never had a single safety incident on my watch. I met Helen at a company picnic in 1998. She was working in accounting then, before she switched to nursing. We got married 2 years later, bought a little house in Warren. Claire came along in 2003. Everything steady and predictable, just the way I liked it. But things had been changing at Deltan for months now. Ever since they brought in Vanessa and her team of efficiency experts. Suddenly there were consultants walking the floor with clipboards, timing how long it took us to complete tasks. They installed new software that tracked everything from break times to bathroom visits, called it optimizing human resources. The warning signs had been there if I'd been paying attention. Last month, they eliminated the coffee station on the factory floor, said it was a non-essential amenity that reduced productivity. The month before that, they cut the Christmas bonus in half. Budget constraints, they explained. Then there was the way Vanessa looked at me during shift meetings, like I was some relic from a bygone era, taking up space that could be filled by someone younger and cheaper. She never asked my opinion about anything, even though I knew that floor better than anyone. Clarence Boone had warned me something was coming. Clarence was our union rep, a guy who'd worked the line for 25 years before taking the position. He'd been hearing rumors about restructuring and age-based optimization. We'd grab coffee sometimes after my shift ended, and he'd tell me what he was picking up from his contacts in HR. They're looking to clean house before the pension obligations hit, he'd said last week. Watch yourself, Harold. You're exactly the kind of expensive veteran they want to cut loose. I should have listened, should have seen it coming. But I'd been loyal to Delton for 3 decades. I figured that loyalty went both ways. Walking to my truck in the parking lot that Monday morning, I realized how wrong I'd been. I sat in my truck for an hour after they walked me out, just sat there in the Delton parking lot, watching the shift change through the chain-link fence. Workers streaming in and out, lunchboxes in hand, talking and laughing like it was any other day. It wasn't any other day. Not for me. My phone started buzzing around 8 a.m. Text messages from guys on my crew. Jimmy Torres. What happened? Security walked you out? Kevin Walsh. Is it true they fired you? Danny Foster. This is bullshit, Harold. What can we do? I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. I needed to think. The cardboard box sat on my passenger seat like evidence of a crime. 31 years reduced to a coffee mug and a picture. They hadn't even let me say goodbye to my crew properly. Just marched me out like I'd stolen something. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about efficiency or cost reduction. This was about sending a message. Show the younger workers what happens when you get too old, too expensive, too comfortable. Make them understand that loyalty is a one-way street. I started the engine and drove home. Helen was in the kitchen making breakfast, humming some tune from the radio. She looked up when I walked in, and her face changed the moment she saw my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. I set the cardboard box on the counter. They terminated me, 3 days before the ceremony. Helen stared at the box, then at me. They what? Vanessa Cole called me in this morning. Said it was an efficiency decision. Still get the pension but no ceremony. I poured myself coffee from the pot Helen had made. 31 years, and they walked me out like a common thief. Helen's face went through about 6 different emotions before settling on anger. That's illegal. That has to be illegal. Probably not, I said. Michigan's a right-to-work state. They can fire you for any reason or no reason, long as it's not discrimination. But 3 days before retirement, that's cruel. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked out the window at my neighbor's yard. Mr. Patterson was mowing his lawn, same as he did every Monday morning for the past 10 years. Some things never changed. You know what the funny thing is? I said. I was ready to leave. 3 more days, and I would have walked away happy, shaken hands with everybody, accepted my plaque, and moved on with my life. Helen sat down across from me. So what are you going to do? I thought about that for a long time. What was I going to do? Roll over and accept it? Pretend the last 31 years didn't matter? That's when my phone rang. Clarence Boone's name on the screen. I answered on the 3rd ring. Yeah? Harold, Clarence said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. We need to talk. Clarence picked me up an hour later. We drove to Murphy's Diner on 8 Mile, the same place where we'd been meeting for years to discuss union business. The coffee was terrible and the pancakes were worse, but it was quiet and nobody bothered us. This is about more than just you, Clarence said as soon as we sat down. I've been hearing things. Vanessa's got a list. I stirred sugar into my coffee. What kind of list? Workers over 60, anyone close to pension eligibility. She's been working with corporate to identify what she calls high-cost human assets. Clarence pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. Got this from a friend in HR. Your name's at the top. I looked at the paper. 23 names, all guys I'd worked with for years. Some of them had decades with the company, just like me. She's planning to fire all of these people? Not fire. Optimize workforce efficiency through strategic personnel transitions. That's the official language. Clarence's voice was bitter. They're going to wait until each guy gets close to retirement, then manufacture some reason to let them go early. Save millions in pension obligations. The coffee tasted like dishwater, but I kept drinking it anyway. So what do we do? File a grievance? Already tried. Vanessa's being careful. Your termination was technically legal. At-will employment and all that corporate garbage. Clarence leaned forward. But here's the thing, Harold. You weren't just any worker. You were the bridge between management and the floor. Guys trusted you. When I needed to know how the crew was feeling about contract negotiations, I came to you. I knew where this was going. For 8 years as shift lead, I'd been the unofficial voice of the workers. When there were problems, people came to me before they went to Clarence. When management wanted to implement new policies, they'd run them by me first to gauge reaction. The crew's already talking, Clarence continued. Jimmy Torres called me at 6 a.m., said the whole night shift was buzzing about what happened to you. They're angry, Harold, real angry. Angry enough to do what? Clarence smiled for the first time since I'd known him. That depends on how angry you are. I thought about Vanessa's smug face. The way she'd dismissed 31 years of service like it was nothing. The ceremony Helen had been looking forward to. The speech I'd been practicing in my head. I'm angry enough, I said. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Clarence had contacts throughout the plant, guys who'd been with the union for years. The beauty of manufacturing was that everything was connected. When one department stopped working, it created a ripple effect that shut down the whole operation. We need to be smart about this, Clarence said. Can't make it look like an organized work action or they'll file injunctions and bring in replacement workers. Has to look spontaneous. What about the contract? Don't we have a no-strike clause? Funny thing about contract violations, Clarence said. They work both ways. Terminating a respected veteran 3 days before retirement without cause? That could be seen as acting in bad faith. I drove home around noon, my head spinning with possibilities. Helen was in the garden pulling weeds from her tomato plants. She looked up when I parked in the driveway. How was your meeting with Clarence? Educational, I said. That afternoon my phone started ringing. Workers from different shifts, guys I'd known for years. Word was spreading through the plant like wildfire. Not just about my termination, but about the list. About Vanessa's plan to eliminate every worker close to retirement. By 5 p.m., I'd talked to more people than I had in months. The anger was real. These weren't troublemakers or malcontents. These were solid workers who'd given decades to Delton, and they were watching their future disappear one termination at a time. Around 6 p.m., Jimmy Torres called. Harold, we need to do something. This isn't right. What do you have in mind, Jimmy? There was a long pause. Tomorrow's Tuesday. My shift starts at 6 a.m. What if I just forgot to turn on my welding station? I smiled. That would be unfortunate, Jimmy. Equipment malfunctions happen all the time. Yeah, Jimmy said. They do. Tuesday morning I was awake before my alarm went off. Old habits. For 31 years I'd been getting up at 4:30 a.m. to make the 6 a.m. shift. My body didn't know how to sleep in. Helen was still in bed when I got dressed and drove to Delton. Not to work, obviously. Just to watch. I parked across the street from the main gate and waited. At 6 a.m. sharp, the day shift started filtering in. Jimmy Torres nodded at me as he walked through the gate. So did Kevin Walsh and Danny Foster. A dozen other guys I'd worked with for years. At 6:15 a.m. I got a text from Jimmy. Welding station's down. Weird electrical problem. At 6:22 a.m. Kevin. Paint booth's acting up. Compressor won't start. At 6:30 a.m. Danny. Forklift battery's dead. Must have been a drain overnight. By 7 a.m. I'd received 15 text messages about various equipment failures throughout the plant. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger safety concerns. Just the kind of minor mechanical problems that happened in old manufacturing facilities. The beautiful thing about manufacturing is that everything's connected. When the welding stations go down, the assembly line stops. When the paint booth malfunctions, finished products can't be completed. When the forklifts break down, materials can't be moved between departments. At 8 a.m., Clarence called me. You need to see this, he said. I drove to the Union Hall on Grand River. Clarence was waiting in the parking lot with a newspaper in his hand. Front page of the business section, he said, handing it to me. The headline read, Delton Manufacturing implements aggressive cost-cutting measures. The article detailed Vanessa's efficiency initiatives, including strategic workforce optimization and elimination of redundant human resources. There was even a quote from her, "We're committed to creating a leaner, more competitive organization by removing outdated personnel structures." Outdated personnel structures, I said. That's what I am now. Keep reading, Clarence said. Buried in the middle of the article was a paragraph about the company's pension obligations. Delton was facing a $70 million liability over the next 5 years as veteran workers reached retirement age. The article mentioned that creative workforce management could significantly reduce these costs. She's not just coming for you, Harold, she's coming for everyone. Clarence's face was grim, and she's proud of it, talking to reporters like she's some kind of business hero. I folded the newspaper and handed it back to him. How many people have seen this? I made copies, distributed them to every department head this morning. Clarence smiled. Funny thing about factory workers, they can read. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Mickey Brennan, the former shift lead who'd retired after his heart attack. Saw the paper. Want to help? Then another text from Tony Ricci in maintenance. Heard about the article, standing by. And another from Beth Sullivan in quality control. This is wrong. What can we do? By 9 a.m., I'd received 47 text messages from current and former Delton employees. Word was spreading beyond the plant floor. People were talking to their families, their neighbors, their friends at other companies. At 10 a.m., Clarence called again. You need to get down here. News van just pulled up at the plant. I drove back to Deltan. Sure enough, there was a Channel 7 news truck parked outside the main gate. A reporter was interviewing workers as they came out for their break. I watched from across the street as Jimmy Torres talked to the camera, then Kevin Walsh, then Danny Foster. One by one, guys who'd never spoken to media in their lives were telling their stories. About 31 years of service, about being walked out 3 days before retirement, about a management culture that treated workers like disposable equipment. My phone rang. Helen's number. Harold, she said, you're on the news. By Wednesday morning, the story had legs. Channel 7 ran a follow-up piece about corporate pension avoidance strategies. The Detroit Free Press picked it up for their business section. Even the Union newsletter featured my story under the headline, 31 years of loyalty means nothing. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when Clarence called at 7 a.m. How many people you think work at Delton? He asked. About 800. How many you think are over 50? I thought about it. Maybe 200. How many you think saw the news last night? I was starting to understand. All of them. Harold, I've been getting calls since 5 a.m. People are scared. They're realizing that if it can happen to you, it can happen to anyone. Clarence paused. They want to do something about it. Like what? Like not showing up for work tomorrow. A work stoppage. The nuclear option. I'd seen it happen at other plants, usually during contract negotiations. But this was different. This wasn't about wages or benefits. This was about dignity. What's the legal risk? I asked. Honestly? Significant. Company could fire everyone, bring in replacement workers. We could lose everything. Clarence's voice was serious. But here's the thing, Harold. Sometimes you've got to take a stand, even when the odds are against you. I thought about my 31 years at Delton, all the overtime shifts, the safety meetings, the training sessions, all the young workers I'd mentored, the problems I'd solved, the crises I'd managed. What do you need from me? Just be here. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., main gate. Don't say anything to the media. Don't make any speeches. Just be here. I spent Wednesday afternoon cleaning my garage, old habit from my factory days. When you've got a problem you can't solve, work with your hands until your brain catches up. Helen found me around 3 p.m., reorganizing my tool bench for the third time. "You're nervous," she said. "Yeah." "About tomorrow?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. "About everything. About what this means. About what happens if it doesn't work." Helen sat down on my workbench. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you've spent 31 years doing what's right for other people, taking care of your crew, making sure everyone got home safe, putting the company's needs ahead of your own." She picked up a wrench from my toolbox. "Maybe it's time to do what's right for you." That evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Guys from different shifts, different departments. People I'd worked with years ago who'd heard about what was happening. Even some folks from other companies, other unions. Jimmy Torres called around 9 p.m. "Harold, I wanted you to know, whatever happens tomorrow, we're with you." "Jimmy, you don't have to." "Yes, we do. You spent 8 years looking out for us. Now it's our turn to look out for you." I went to bed early that night, but I didn't sleep much. Kept thinking about my dad and what he'd told me about finding a good company and keeping my head down, about loyalty being a two-way street. Around 2 a.m. I got up and made coffee, sat at my kitchen table looking out at the dark street, thinking about what morning would bring. At 4 a.m. I got dressed and drove to Deltan. Same routine I'd followed for 31 years, except this time was different. This time, I wasn't going to work. I was going to war. At 5:45 a.m. I parked across from the Deltan main gate and watched the sunrise paint the factory walls orange and red. The parking lot was empty except for a few management cars and the security guard's pickup truck. Then they started arriving. First came Jimmy Torres and Kevin Walsh walking together from the bus stop. They didn't go through the gate. Instead, they stood on the sidewalk outside the fence and waited. Then Danny Foster pulled up in his old Chevy, followed by 3 guys from the paint department. They joined Jimmy and Kevin on the sidewalk. By 6 a.m., there were 50 people standing outside the gate. By 6:15, there were 100. By 6:30, the entire day shift was there, plus half the afternoon crew and a dozen retirees who'd driven in to show support. Nobody was chanting or shouting. Nobody was carrying signs. They were just standing there, refusing to cross the line. Clarence Boone walked over to my truck at 6:45 a.m. "You see that?" he said, pointing toward the administrative building. Vanessa Cole was standing at her office window on the second floor, talking rapidly into her phone. Even from across the parking lot, I could see the panic on her face. At 7 a.m., the plant manager came out and tried to talk to the crowd. The workers listened politely, but nobody moved. When he was finished, Jimmy Torres stepped forward. "We're not coming back until Harold McMillan gets the respect he deserves," Jimmy said loud enough for everyone to hear. 31 years of service means something. The crowd murmured agreement. Still no shouting, no anger, just quiet determination. By 8 a.m., a second news van had arrived, then a third. Workers were being interviewed, telling their stories about what Harold McMillan had meant to them, about the culture of fear that Vanessa Cole had created. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Deltan Manufacturing main number. "Mr. McMillan, this is Gerald Hoffman, the CEO. I wonder if we could meet." 2 weeks later, I was standing in the Union Hall on Grand River, looking out at a room packed with workers, retirees, and their families. Clarence Boone was at the podium, holding a gold-plated wrench that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Harold McMillan worked 31 years for Deltan Manufacturing," Clarence said to the crowd. "He never missed a safety meeting, never had an accident on his watch, and never forgot that his job was to take care of the people around him." The meeting with CEO Hoffman had been brief. Vanessa Cole was already gone, reassigned to some consulting firm in Ohio. The termination was reversed, my benefits restored, my retirement processed with full honors. The other names on her list were safe. But I'd told Hoffman I didn't want to go back to the plant. 31 years was enough. I was ready to move on. "Some people think loyalty is weakness," Clarence continued. "They think if you work hard and keep your mouth shut, you'll get walked on. Harold proved them wrong." He handed me the wrench. The inscription read, "Harold McMillan, a man who never forgot where he came from." The room erupted in applause. Helen was crying in the front row. Claire was beaming next to her, my granddaughter asleep in her arms. I looked out at all those faces, guys I'd worked alongside for decades, young workers I'd trained, people who'd taken a risk to stand with me when it mattered. You didn't need to strike a blow, Clarence had told me earlier. You just had to leave the room. He was right. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact. Sometimes that's all the revenge you need.